Check out how you can get those solar panels installed at your home or residence by going to onesolarsolution.com. Bringing you the world news coming up next. This is Radio Caravan, the world news read by Shabnam Modgil. Democrats formally nominated Joe Biden as their presidential candidate, with party elders, a new generation of politicians and voters in every state joining in an extraordinary pandemic-cramped virtual convention to send him into the general election campaign to oust President Trump. If Joe Biden wins November's U.S. election, he'll be the oldest president in American history, surpassing Donald Trump's record. At 78 on Inauguration Day, he will be older than Ronald Reagan on the day he left office. The theme of the second night of the Democratic National Convention last night was Leadership Matters, and the Democratic Party leaned heavily on those with prior government experience to make the case that Joe Biden is better equipped than Donald Trump to handle the responsibility of the presidency. Jill Biden made an emotional case for her husband as the ideal candidate to unite a country torn apart by racial divisions and suffering through the COVID-19 pandemic during her keynote address to the Democratic National Convention last night. Former Secretary of State Colin Powell, who served prominently in Republican George W. Bush's administration, added his voice to the Democratic Convention. And Carolyn Kennedy and her son harkened back to her dad, John F. Kennedy, in an appearance last night at the Democratic National Convention in support of Joe Biden. The widow of Republican Senator John McCain spoke at the Democratic National Convention on behalf of presidential candidate Joe Biden, a reminder of her late husband's bitter relationship with President Trump. U.S. Senator Kamala Harris gives the most important speech of her political career tonight when she addresses the Democratic National Convention as presidential nominee Joe Biden's running mate. The former prosecutor from California, who made history as the first black woman and Asian American on a major presidential ticket, is expected to aggressively press the case against President Trump's re-election on the 3rd of November. And Indian origin Senator Kamala Harris will deliver that acceptance speech tonight as the Democratic vice presidential candidate to become the first ever American of Indian and African descent to be nominated by a major party for the top post. The 55-year-old is the first Indian American to be selected for the second highest elected office of the United States after that of the president. Former President Obama will close out today's Democratic National Convention after Senator Kamala Harris accepts the party's nomination for vice president. And after more than 4 decades in public life, Hillary Clinton will return to the Democratic National Convention to cement her legacy as a champion of women in politics. Grappling for votes in the spotlight as Democrats hold their national convention, President Trump targeted voters in key states and constituencies yesterday and promised a pardon for Susan B. Anthony, a leader in the women's suffrage movement. He flew to Arizona, one of the top 2020 battleground states, to press his case against his Democratic challenger, painting him as radically left in one of his harshest broadsides yet of the campaign. President Trump's campaign has called Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden and his Indian origin running mate Kamala Harris the two most spineless career politicians ever, and that their candidature indicated the formal takeover of the Democratic Party by the radical left. The U.S. Postmaster General said he was suspending controversial cuts until after the presidential election following allegations from Democrats that the vote was being manipulated in favor of Donald Trump. U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said the Postmaster General's announcement of a pause to changes in services ahead of the election did not go far enough, and the House still planned to vote on Saturday on a postal service bill. U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi said that congressional Democrats are willing to cut their COVID-19 relief bill in half to get an agreement on new legislation with the White House and Republicans. The World Health Organization said the spread of the coronavirus disease around the world is driven by younger people, those in their 20s, 30s and 40s, many of whom are not just asymptomatic but also unaware that they are infected. The epidemic is changing. The pandemic has now killed more than 781,000 people worldwide, and over 22 million across the globe have been diagnosed with COVID-19. United States, the worst affected, with more than 5.4 million diagnosed cases and at least 171,823 deaths. In the most ambitious plan of its kind, Los Angeles Unified has announced plans to test its roughly 600,000 students and 75,000 employees as the nation's second-largest school district prepares for the eventual return to in-person instruction. And health officials in California revealed that a South Lake Tahoe resident has tested positive for the plague after 5 years. California Governor Gavin Newsom declared a statewide emergency to help ensure the availability of vital resources to combat fires burning across the state. Many exploded in the west, particularly in California, due to numerous lightning strikes. At least 26 wildfire complexes burning in California, and some of them contain several smaller fires. Yearly blazes that occur during the dry season in Brazil are causing havoc in the world's largest rainforest as residents battle the fires that are destroying their farmland and threatening their homes. And U.S. Customs officers intercepted a Venezuela-bound private jet in South Florida loaded with 82 firearms, including a sniper rifle, plus 63,000 rounds of ammunition. And Ecuador's naval forces said about half of the 325 vessels from a predominantly Chinese fishing fleet operating near the Galapagos Islands have turned off their satellite systems and cut communications to prevent their activities from being tracked. After a resounding defeat in the UN Security Council, the U.S. is poised to call for the UN to reimpose sanctions on Iran under a rarely used diplomatic maneuver, a move that is likely to further isolate the Trump administration and may set off a credibility crisis for the UN. Iran's death toll from the new coronavirus has surpassed 20,000 this morning, and United Nations head Antonio Guterres demanded the immediate and unconditional release of Mali's president and members of his government after they were seized by rebel soldiers. He resigned to avoid bloodshed after he was detained in a military coup, and the soldiers who ousted him say they plan to set up a civilian transitional government and hold new elections. More than 15 years after a massive truck bomb killed former Lebanese Prime Minister Rafik Hariri, a United Nations-backed special tribunal found only one of the 4 accused members of the Hezbollah militant group guilty of involvement in the assassination. Hundreds of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip this morning rallied against the U.S. brokered deal to normalize ties between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. Secret talks and quiet ties, that's what paved the way for last week's deal between the UAE and Israel to normalize relations. A senior UN official warned that war-torn Yemen is sliding towards famine as the coronavirus spreads and its economy implodes. Russian President Putin told German Chancellor Angela Merkel that any attempts to interfere in the domestic affairs of Belarus would be unacceptable. A German icebreaker carrying scientists on a year-long international expedition in the high Arctic has reached the North Pole after making an unplanned detour because of lighter-than-usual sea ice conditions. Britain is unlikely to follow France in ordering people to wear face coverings at work because its test and trace scheme shows most people catch COVID-19 in house-to-house transmissions. And former UK Prime Ministers John Major, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown joined economists Amartya Sen, Kaushik Basu and 270 others to call for urgent action to deal with the education emergency across the globe triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. South Korea is going to ban large public gatherings and shut down churches and night spots in the greater Seoul area amid the sharpest surge in viral infections in nearly 6 months. And North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un is clamping down on pet dogs in Pyongyang, criticizing pet ownership as a tainted trend by Burgessy ideology. 2 powerful and shallow undersea earthquakes shook western Indonesia today, causing panic, but no immediate reports of casualties or damage. You're listening to the World News on Radio Caravan, and pro-democracy protests have rumbled on for a month in Thailand with calls for free elections and a new constitution. The Philippines said it has temporarily banned the importation of domestic and wild birds and their products from Australia after the presence of highly pathogenic H7N7 avian flu virus detected at an egg farm in Manila. And authorities in Mauritius have arrested the captain of the Japanese ship that ran aground near Mauritius and spilled 1,000 tons of oil on the Indian Ocean Islands' protected coastline and pristine waters. Nepal has temporarily banned public and religious gatherings and most transportation in its capital of Kathmandu and surrounding areas, asking residents to stay home. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the relationship between the U.S. and China has never been as dysfunctional as it is today. Floods in the mountainous southwest China have washed away roads and forced tens of thousands from their homes. And the deployment of China's most advanced J-20 stealth fighter near the border with India should not be overinterpreted in context of the Sino-India border friction as the tension is de-escalating, according to Chinese state media in Beijing. Late classical singer and Padma Vibhushan Pandit Jasraj's body has been brought back to Mumbai from New Jersey, where he died this past Monday. And the Antim Darshan will be held tomorrow at his Versova residence, followed by the last rites, which will take place at the Pavan Hans Crematorium in Vile-Parle, with state honours and a 21-gun salute. With a record over 60,000 people recuperating from coronavirus in a day, the total recoveries today have crossed 2 million, pushing the recovery rate to 73.64%. 7 of the 10 districts in India with the highest COVID-19 positivity rate are from Maharashtra. And malaria cases have shown a significant spurt in the first fortnight of the month in Mumbai. A fortnight's rain has filled Mumbai's supply lakes up to 83% of capacity. And the Enforcement Directorate authorities are conducting raids at 4 locations in Mumbai, including Andheri, in the Tablighi Jamaat money laundering case. The Supreme Court has allowed the CBI to take over the probe in the Sushant Singh Rajput case. And we do have Pakistan-born quantum astrophysicist Nargis Mawalwala, who has been named the new dean of the MIT School of Science, one of the 5 schools of MIT. Born to a Parsi family in Karachi, she received her early education from the convent of Jesus and Mary School. Pakistan Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa, who started his Saudi Arabia visit to calm diplomatic strains, has been declined a meeting with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, but he did meet with the Deputy Minister for Defence Khalid bin Salman bin Abdul Aziz.